Maybe this is better. Maybe this is better. How's this? Too close? Hi friends, welcome back to the channel. As you can see, we have a bit of a different setup today. I'm really hoping the audio is okay. Looks like it might be a little too loud. Hopefully your eardrums are okay. Welcome back to the channel. Hi if you're new here, hi if you're not. This is a temporary filming setup while I'm in the midst of moving and figuring out my life. So bear with me while we navigate this. Super excited to get into today's interview. I had the chance to sit down with a licensed mental health professional, therapist to be exact, who unfortunately was taken advantage of and joined a coaching program that specifically targeted mental health professionals. I do not want to give away the content of this interview, but we'll just leave it at that. If you have a story you want to share here on my channel, the Google form to submit your scam stories or to be interviewed here on the channel are linked down below, so please get in touch with me there. Again, not going to spend too much time on the introduction. Shout out to my channel VIPs as always. Thank you so much for being here. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up if you haven't already. Subscribe to my channel, and let's go ahead and jump right in. Welcome, and thank you so much for coming on here to chat with me today. I'm really excited to get into our conversation, and I appreciate you for being vulnerable and willing to share your story. So you're welcome to start wherever you want.
Sure. So it started off in the MLM space, where I was a former Beachbody coach. And then I found the anti-MLM space and was heavily watching, CCJJ, DC, and like everyone just following along. But back then I was mostly following JJ and Aaron at the time when I got sucked into the coaching game space. And the coaching space was not so much through MLM, it was actually through a boss. So a background is I'm a therapist, so I have a master's degree in social work. And so I was working at an inpatient treatment facility as a clinician, and it was a very toxic work environment. And so I had just left that position when my boss from that place reached out and said, hey, I think you'd be really great at this, and really kind of geared it towards mental health professionals versus, life coaching. And I should back up a little bit. So he was also the person that oversees me for my licensure. So he was the one that was signing off my hours for getting my state licensure as a licensed therapist. So there was a lot of trust built with this person. And this person was really someone I looked up to and was like, okay, well, if he's making this suggestion and he's been in the field so long, this is a great person to listen to, and I can learn so much from him. So I was like, okay, yeah, let me dive into this. And almost immediately I caught on to the MLM scamminess of coaching. One of the first courses was, what is your why? And I was like, oh no, what did I do?
I'm actually really curious. This is fascinating to me because obviously from the interviews I've done, I've never actually spoken to a licensed therapist that got caught up in coaching. And it's very interesting to me to think because a lot of the times, especially in my comments, it's the therapists that are commenting being like, these people who didn't go to school to become therapists are now giving people life advice. And now you're kind of caught up in it, but you do have that background. So I find this really, really interesting.
Yeah. And that was why I didn't think that it was going to be that type of coaching scenario, because it was from another licensed therapist who was supposed to be signing off my hours. And I was like, oh, okay, it's not going to be this. So I was looking to kind of leave the mental health space for a little bit, take a break, mainly because of insurance stuff, which is, I think, a reason a lot of people get out of the health field in general, is learning all the coding and billing and baloney that goes into that. But yeah, so it was very fascinating so I caught on to that. I was just like, the why, and the MLM bells are dinging in my brain going, oh no, I just spent over $3,000 on this course and I'm learning about tell me your why. Oh no. But it was interesting because it was a mix of the MLM speech and 12-step work. So the facility I worked at was was both DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy based, and 12-step recovery based. It was a mixture of tell us your why, and then let's do a fourth step, but we're not going to call it a fourth step. So for those who don't know what a fourth step is, and 12 steps is, you do an inventory of all of your resentments that you have, and you break down to try to find out like what fears generate that resentment and what fears propel you to do these things. And it's very insightful into your own self and being, but it can also in the MLM space really hit those vulnerable points and let the coach know, hey, this is the hot topic button to kind of suck onto and hold on to. And pretty much that's what that was utilized for.
Were you then like essentially sharing that with the person who was running the program? Like you're
Yes,
supposed to sit down and figure it out, and then you like openly tell them these are my pain points, essentially.
pretty much, yeah.
Oh,
I think the cringiest part about the whole scenario was that it was a small group coaching session. It was a group coaching session, and the group was also made up of former clients from the treatment center, as well as other workers. So like very ethically like broken. There was a lot of ethical like holy bonanzas.
okay. And so, sorry, just so I understand, your boss at the time was the one that recruited you into it, or were they the one facilitating the actual program?
Both. So the coaching program that he was in was like, okay, you start your own coaching business. So he had then finished his program and had now started his own LLC coaching business, and had recruited me and like had sucked me into his courses.
Oh, and he was also bringing in like former patients.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. This is wild to me because from like I used to work in the mental health space as well, and there are at least like obviously I'm in Canada, the laws might be slightly different, but there are multiple contracts that you sign essentially indicating that like you will not pursue what's considered personal relationships outside of the professional context, right? So when clients exit the program, I can't like become friends with them or recruit them into my business. So it seems like a very blurry line there.
Yes. So with our license, with our specific licensure, which is social work, we have a 7-year stipulation, and that was not being abided by. And they were using this loophole of being in a very rural, and I mean rural community. Cross like they sign waivers going in saying like you may end up knowing these people outside because of how small the community is. And so that allows kind of that Facebook interactions and things, but this definitely overstepped. And I definitely filed some things with the board after I completed and was just like, because not only was it cringy, but it was ethically and potentially even legally wrong.
Again, like with any of these coaching programs, it's always sort of preying on vulnerable people. And I think in like the realm of addiction and mental health specifically, that's almost like a very unique and almost extra vulnerable, for lack of a better term, sort of demographic to be targeting.
Yeah.
So I think from like a moral perspective, I don't know, maybe it's just like my naive perspective that like most people that go into therapy do so because they want to help people. And this seems like so counterintuitive from my perspective.
Yeah, so his introduction to the field was his own battle with addiction. I think there's a level of I see you because of your addiction and I want to help you the way I was helped. And I never got the sense that he was doing this maliciously. I think we were his first coaching group session. So I think he was fresh out of his own coaching program and caught in the whirlwind himself. But then I learned who the person who coached him was actually our CEO of the treatment facility. So like it was just this hierarchy going like right down through.
I think because the industry itself is so unregulated, it's like anything goes. Doesn't matter where you work, what you do, right. You want to recruit whoever you want, like go ahead and recruit them into it because it doesn't matter.
And so where I worked had a lot of ethical concerns to begin with. However, like I said, very rural community. And so this treatment center is the number one employer for the community. So they're not going to shut that space down because it employs the majority of our area.
So then was there anything that happened after you reported what was going on?
No.
So it just kind of, it's whatever.
It's whatever. Yeah.
And then what was your experience? So you went through this program. Did you finish the program? What happened after that?
So I did finish the program because I was just like, oh, I spent the money. I might as well go to all of these. So I went through it, and every single one I'd be going there and then I'd be watching JJ and Aaron V's and I'd be like, oh my gosh, like I feel like I'm being scammed. Like too many things are lining up, but this is not an MLM. And I'm like, I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to be getting out of this. And I ultimately ended up having a different person sign my hours after the course, and transitioned to a different person to oversee that because I was not pleased and felt very scammed. And it was a weird transition because during the course it went from like show me your vulnerabilities, tell me your why, build like what you want to coach about, and then it got into the like pricing well beyond like what is actually part of the actual industry that you want to be coaching on. For me, during that time period, I was really heavy into like organization. So I wanted to go in specifically work with one of the specialties I was working with in therapy was hoarding. However, insurance doesn't cover hoarding like programs and stuff. So I wanted to look for a coaching program where I could go into people's homes and help them organize their stuff from a trauma informed level, but not necessarily from an insurance induced like clinical level, so that I could charge people a reasonable price. But he was like, no, it needs to be thousands and thousands of dollars. I'm like, but people don't have thousands and thousands of dollars to learn how to organizing. You should know this as a clinician. You should understand this. And he's like, nope, thousands of dollars. Like everybody I coach has to leave with a minimum of a $5,000 charge for their programs.
This is the interesting piece too, because like you kind of indicated earlier, I don't think anyone really gets into coaching with malicious intent. They're never like, oh, I want to become a coach so I can take advantage of vulnerable people. Like they genuinely think they're helping people. But then what we see is, so let's just say I came into coaching as like a life coach. Now, the natural transition that a lot of people take when they start out as, maybe a hoarding coach, a life coach, whatever that is they transition into business coaching because business coaching is where the money is. So I could charge, $50 an hour for my life coaching sessions, but it's much harder to sell those at scale in order to make a sustainable living. So what I instead do is build out these coaching programs like the one you're talking about, where I can just charge each person $5,000. And then I make my salary back much quicker with very few people versus like actually providing a valuable service. And so I think that's where people get caught up and where we lose sight of like, okay, my intentions are actually good, because they get so focused on like, how can I make the most amount of money?
Exactly. Yep.
So then what ended up happening after this experience? So you're in the program, you're building out your offer. He's telling you like you should price it higher. You're like, I don't really want to do that. Like, what happened next?
Yeah, so then came the social media, like you have to go live, you have to do reels, you have to do this, and didn't want to do any of it. So I half-assed it and was like, oh yeah, no, like not even anything related to what I wanted to sell, just to be like, yeah, I went live. Yay. Like I went through the checklist of kind of, and I just went through the motions really. And by the end of it, I was like, this is going nowhere. Like I am not doing this. I'm not pursuing this. Like this is a scam. And if I go forward with this, I'll be scamming other people. Hell no. So I was just like, yeah, forget that. I'll just go back to working on my hours towards my clinical licensure and, figure out what I can do to help people like moving forward in a different way. It was weird. It was a very bizarre because then it's like you spent this money, but then you did nothing with it. And it's like, well, that was a waste.
Yeah, I think there reaches a point where we kind of just have to cut our losses, unfortunately. And we're like, well, won't make that mistake again, but really wish I hadn't, because I could use that $3,000 somewhere else. And so actually, I have a question, because this was something that came up in an interview, like a couple interviews ago. And it's this idea of, okay, $3,000, that's quite a significant amount of money. What was it like for you in your experience making that investment? Like, was it easy for you to be like, oh yeah, sure, like throw my money at you? Like, I don't know.
It was I don't know about high pressure. It was the high pressure, get them on a call. And that was another part of the coaching program, was how to get people on these calls to like then push and push and push. Which interestingly enough, I checked before I reached out to you. I was like, I wonder if he still does these courses, because like I'd be really even more disappointed if he did. Good news, no longer in the coaching business, got out, but he still utilizes the coaching tactics to recruit patients, which is super cringy. Like the wording on the website is super cringy. It's like if you need whatever his specialty is, he's like, get on an opportunity call with me to see if you would be the right client for me. And I'm like, oh God, like no, like you don't use that wording with actual patients. Ugh.
You're gonna have to send me that in private so I can just look for my own
Yeah.
curiosity. Oh my God. Okay, and so then I guess that brings up the question, like, is there not an ethical standard for therapists of like how you're able to get clients? Or I guess they don't really cover marketing, probably.
They don't really cover marketing. So the only thing that you can't do is basically like say you're working with somebody at one location and you move to another location. You can't then tell the client, hey, I'm going to this location. If you want, I'll keep you as a client, move with me. You can tell them where they're going and they can choose to follow you, but you can't like promote them to follow you. And every state is different. So in the States, every state has its own set of standards. So you have the nationwide ethical standards for social work and licensing, but then every state has its own unique license and what's allowed and what's not allowed. So for example, in like a big city, the ability to have any contact outside of your sessions would be highly prohibited, and any sort of reaching out to the board saying, hey, this happened would be thoroughly investigated and a kibosh would be put on it. Whereas in a rural community, it's more like, okay, yeah, there's going to be this cross, like you may know this person from in town and that may happen, but just maintain ethics of keeping those boundaries of what happened in treatment stayed in treatment, and your personal relationship is your personal relationship. And if when you're working with somebody who comes across your desk who you do know from the community and it would be a complete conflict of interest, talking to your boss and saying, hey, this is a conflict of interest, this is why, and they would be reassigned to somebody else. And then you just have to ignore the fact that you know that they go to that facility.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, it's very, very interesting to see the sort of crossover when you work in such a highly regulated industry to then see someone transitioning into like an industry where they have more freedom, we'll say, freedom to
Yes.
do as they please. So it's always very interesting to me. And I've seen it a few times, especially like in where I used to live. There were a few licensed therapists that then went and became life coaches. And I was like, is this just a loophole to like be able to practice as you please? Or what are we doing here? So
I can talk a little bit about what that transition looks like. So when you're in the licensed therapist space, there's a lot of regulations of who you can and can't see, and it gets very frustrating. So speaking specifically of American insurance, insurance will dictate how many sessions a person can have based on their disorder. So for example, anxiety might only get 12 sessions, even if that person has crippling anxiety to the point where it negatively impacts their daily living, which then makes therapists have to make a decision of, do you tack on a secondary illness that can get them more sessions because they clinically need it, but their insurance won't cover it. So then you have to question your own ethics of, it's for the good of the patient, but at the same time, ethically wrong for the financial side of it. And then you have, if you're in community mental health, sometimes it's as low as 8 sessions per client, and then they're out the door. And depending on their insurance type, they're not going to find somebody outside of this community mental health center. Now, you can't realistically diagnose somebody, create a treatment plan, and complete a treatment plan in 8 sessions. Physically impossible. So the constant fighting to get what your client needs becomes very overwhelming and taxing and burdensome. And so with life coaching, you say like the whole, like, this is not a therapy, like what we're giving you is it's not this, but you feel like you can help people the way you want to help people without the restraints that these insurance companies put on you and the restraints that the industry as a whole puts on you. And it's something that a lot of therapists struggle with, because the restraints are, when I worked in community mental health, for example, I had 93 clients. And those 93, I had to see some of them weekly, biweekly, but I had to see them at least all monthly. Now, there was not enough billable hours in a month to cover 93 people. How is that ethically okay? But then also mandated to take on one new client every single week. So what then happens is you get the pressure from above to start kicking people off your caseload who've been on your caseload for a while. How is that ethically okay to kick people off your caseload just because you need to get your wait list down? It's not ethically okay. And so you get to this point where you feel beat up by the system. You're like, okay, I got into this to help people. And I learned these great tools in school. I learned these great skills that I want to share with people. And I'm being told, pump the brakes. You can actually only see these people for a very short amount of time. You're not actually going to be able to help them. And you have to stick to a treatment plan that is worded in a way that the insurance will still pay for it, which sometimes does not cover the actual issues the client is currently going through. And then you have to fight for the payments, fight to get more sessions for clients who need more sessions, try to help clients find private people that they can afford, like if they're going to be kicked off. And all of this is so simultaneously happening that you just get jaded to the system of like, what's the point? Like at this point, you're not helping anybody. You're just a paper pusher. All you're doing is paperwork and meeting the needs of the insurance companies. You're not actually doing anything beneficial for the human. And that's what we went to school for, was the human. So then life coaching comes into the picture of you don't have these industry standards of paper pushing, insurance company overseeing, and auditors that make it so that you're confined, like micromanaged and confined to very strict realm. And you're like, I can help more people this way. But as you get into it, you find, oh crap, there's no standard. Anybody can do this. And there's a lot of horrible advice out there and a lot of just shady practices that are happening. And so then it's like, okay, so there's no real helpful space there. And then again, you just go, well, crap. What happens to people who just need help?
And so was that the appeal for you? Is that how you were sold it? Was like, oh, if you're not happy with how you can run your therapy practice, like, why don't you try this program? It'll help you build what you want. And that's what like all of this coach's marketing was tied to.
Yes. Yep. It was like, are you burnt out from being a mental health provider and want to be able to help more people without having to appeal to the insurance companies and
build your practice on your own terms? Always. It's like, as you're telling this story, I'm just thinking it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're a mental health professional, if you're someone who works like the dreaded 9-to-5 job, if you just graduated college and don't know what you want to do with your life. Like, it's the same copy paste story, just insert industry here. This is the magic solution you need to solve all your problems.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so painful.
Yes. And so like by the end of the program, you were supposed to have one opportunity calls. And that's when I dropped out. If I was like, I can't have an opportunity call. Like, I'm not trying to sell anybody anything.
Like you were supposed to have recruited a warm lead by then?
Yeah, well, at that point, I was so I went into it like wanting to actually just create a business. Like, I didn't even want to coach other people. I actually wanted to just have a business where I went into people's homes and helped them. So that's what I thought I was getting. But instead, I was learning how to recruit people and sell them training materials. And I was like, I don't want to teach people how to do this. Like, I just want to go in and help people. And I'm just like, this is so twisty.
And I think that's really disappointing too. And it's the same story I hear over and over again, is this idea of like, I thought I was going to learn how to build a business. And then in some cases it's like, and I asked my coach, a question related to business, and they told me like, we don't teach that here. But it's like, you told me I was going to learn how to build a business, and now I'm just here making it up on my own. Like, what's going on?
Yep.
Being sold on one thing and then delivered something completely different. So it's very, very disappointing.
Yes.
Is there anything else you wanted to share? Any other parts of the story that you think you didn't touch on, or any important messages, the warning to the wary?
I think the biggest one is, that it can come from anybody, even those that, you have a lot of respect for and trust for. And that if you hear those kind of key phrases of, that magical opportunity and being your own boss, even like in the anti-MLM space, like the know your why, like if any of those things come up, cut your loss and walk away. Like don't even waste your time finishing that program, because at that point it's too late. Like it's already been a waste.
And I think you risk entering an echo chamber in a sense if you allow
Hmm.
yourself to continue into it, because I think the more and more you invest in, additional mentors or other trainings. So maybe you take this one and you're like, okay, this one didn't work, but maybe this other person is going to be able to teach me something different. And that was my experience. Like I hired one coach. It was like, meh. I found a different coach, was like, okay, maybe she knows what she's talking about. But it just like further puts you down this rabbit hole where you're constantly hearing the same thing to the point where you're like, maybe these people are right. Like maybe what they're saying is true. I'm just not doing it right.
Hmm.
And so if you can allow yourself to kind of listen to those red flags in the beginning, I think in the long term, you're going to save yourself a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of disappointment.
Yeah. And so since this coaching business, like I've actually, my husband and I actually opened our own business. And so some of the things that I wanted to share with listeners is, the things that you want to learn about business, you can find easily online. If you want to learn about, for example, like how to do the finance piece, whatever software you choose typically has free online programs you can go through to walk you right through how to use it. And you learn all those skills that you need. And you learn those skills for free. It's the software you're actually using for your business, and it's going to actually help promote your business as a whole. Then with other things, it's just, whatever you're struggling with in building that business is finding a resource that is reputable, whether it's through a well-known business that has a social media presence, that has videos that you're able to watch, or whether it's a content creator who's offering free videos on it. Because if they're asking for money, you're going to end up in that echo chamber.
If they're only asking for money, I think there are some creators out there who offer a lot of free, valuable content and then also have like a paid offer if you want to like
Yes.
get it done quicker. But if they're just giving you buzzwords, fluffy, like expectations of like, imagine your dream life, like, and they're not giving tangible, implementable advice, that's usually a pretty big, like for free, that's usually a pretty big red flag in my experience, for sure. And like YouTube, guys, just look up, how do I register my business? I'm sure somebody has made a video that will tell you how to do that. Like, so it just depends, I guess. If you have the time, you can definitely figure it out for free. I mean, I just trialed and errored my way through it mostly. So awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come and chat with me and to share your experience and to share your advice. I think it's really valuable to people who are maybe on the fence thinking about joining, or just to relate. I know a lot of the times in the comments, it's just like, oh my God, I had such a similar experience. And so I appreciate the vulnerability and the willingness to share.
Thank you.
Okay, friends, as always, I hope you enjoyed that interview. Again, if you are interested in having your story shared here on my channel, my Google form is linked down below. I would love to hear your thoughts on the conversation that we had here today, so be sure to leave those in the comments down below as well. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up if you haven't already. Subscribe to my channel, and I will leave you with this video right here next. Bye-bye!